My entire life was a lie. I know people throw that around sometimes, like when they find out their best friend was talking behind their back or when their favorite celebrity turned out to be problematic. But for me, those words aren't an exaggeration. They're the raw, bitter truth. At 17, I thought the only things I needed to worry about were college applications, keeping my grades up, and maybe whether my crush would ever notice me. Instead, I discovered something that ripped apart every memory I had, every feeling of safety I thought my family gave me. It wasn't just one small crack in the glass. It was like the entire thing shattered at once, leaving pieces too sharp to hold on to. You grow up believing certain things are unshakable. Your parents are your parents. Your house is your home. Your life, even with its ordinary ups and downs, belongs to you. But imagine finding out that even those basics weren't real. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the people you trusted most had built your whole world on secrets. I keep replaying all the little moments that never made sense, the subtle signs I ignored because I trusted them too much to believe anything was wrong. Now, those fragments cut deeper, reminding me how blind I was to what was right in front of me. I thought I belonged. I thought I was loved. But suddenly, none of it felt true anymore. I'm telling this now not because it's easy. It still feels like tearing open a wound, but because hiding it would feel worse. If you've ever been betrayed by the very people you thought would protect you forever, maybe you'll understand how it feels to realize your entire identity, everything you are, was never entirely yours at all. When I was younger, if you had asked me to describe my family, I probably would have smiled and said, we were just like everyone else. My mom was the soft, warm-hearted type. She was the one who made sure I always had extra snacks in my backpack, who hugged me tight when I cried over silly things, and who, in my mind, could fix absolutely anything with her calm voice and gentle hands. My dad, on the other hand, was stricter, the kind of man who never let me slack off when it came to school or chores. He could be intimidating, but deep down I thought it was just his way of protecting us. And then there was my older brother. He was the golden child, the one teachers adored, the one everyone compared me to. Sometimes annoyingly, but I warned myself not to resent him because I thought that was just what little sisters went through. We weren't rich, but our life was stable. We had family dinners every night, the kind where my dad made us put away our phones and actually talk to each other. We went on vacations, not flashy or exotic, but enough to give me scrapbooks filled with photos of us smiling on beaches or bundled up in mountain cabins. People would look at us and think we had it made. Sometimes even I believed it. But even wrapped in that picture-perfect setting, there were always moments that nagged at me. I tried to bury them, but they lingered like splinters under the skin. For one, I never really looked like anyone else. My brother resembled dad, tall, dark hair, sharp features, while mom and dad shared that same olive skin and smile. I, on the other hand, was noticeably lighter, my features softer, almost like I'd been cut out of one frame and pasted into another family's portrait. Every time someone asked who I took after, the room would fall quiet for a split second too long before mom would chirp, "She's a mix of all of us, I guess." Then there were the whispers. Sometimes I'd catch them standing in the kitchen late at night, their voices hushed, my name slipping between sentences. The second I walked in, they'd freeze and change the subject to something painfully casual, like the weather or tomorrow's grocery list. Even with my brother, there were looks he gave me when he thought I wasn't watching, expressions that flickered too quickly for me to read. Family photos were another thing. When I flipped through albums, my eyes were always drawn to myself. Not in a self-absorbed way, but in that slightly uncomfortable way where you realize you're the only one who looks like a stranger. Everyone else blended together so naturally, but I stuck out like someone hadn't gotten the memo. Still, I convinced myself these things were just in my head. After all, why would I question the two people who raised me, who cared for me, who gave me all the love and stability I thought a child could ask for? But deep down, buried beneath layers of denial, something whispered that there was more beneath the surface, something I wasn't supposed to see. By the time I hit my teenage years, the cracks started showing in ways that I couldn't ignore anymore. It was like the universe was slowly slipping little clues into my life, daring me to pay attention. The first one came in the most mundane way possible: paperwork. One afternoon, my dad asked me to find a copy of something in the home office. My school enrollment forms, I think. As I flipped through the stack of documents, I noticed something strange. My birth date was off by a few days. At first, I thought it was just a typo, but when I asked my mom about it later, her reaction was anything but casual. Her face went stiff, her voice a little too sharp when she snapped, "That's just a clerical mistake. Don't overthink it." Then she practically yanked the form from my hat, ends, shoved it into the drawer, and changed the subject so fast it left me dizzy. It was moments like that which made me start noticing other odd things around the house. For instance, my mom kept a drawer in her dresser that was always locked. Always. It didn't matter how much I asked or pretended I needed something from it, she would shut me down immediately. She would even get defensive, telling me, "Some things aren't meant for kids," in a tone that felt icy and final. That drawer haunted me. What could be so private, so forbidden, that even a quick peek would destroy the peace in our home? And then there were the reactions whenever I asked simple questions about my early childhood. You'd think they'd be happy to share stories about when I was a baby or a toddler, but their answers were often clipped, vague, or they'd flat out change the subject. "You were such an easy baby," my dad would say, but the way his eyes darted away told me he wasn't being fully honest. My brother once teased me about having a mystery past, and instead of laughing, my parents nearly shouted him into silence. At the time, I brushed it off as just their strange way of keeping family matters private, but in hindsight, it was clearly fear. I'll never forget the day the neighbor unintentionally deepened my suspicions. I was about 14, helping her carry groceries inside when she squinted at me and said casually, "You really don't look like your mother at all. It's uncanny." I froze. I laughed nervously, but her words lingered long after I left her house. That night at dinner, I repeated what she said, half joking, half needing reassurance. My mom's fork clattered against her plate, and Dad's jaw tightened instantly. "People say stupid things," he said firmly. "Don't let it get into your head," Mom added in that trembly voice of hers. "Of course you look like me in your own way. Don't be dramatic." But the sheer panic in their tone only made me wonder more. Why panic if there was nothing to hide? From then on, it became this storm in my head. I couldn't look at my family the same way. Every glance in the mirror felt like an accusation. I became obsessed with finding similarities. Maybe the shape of my nose matched Mom's, or maybe my smile matched Dad's, but it was like forcing puzzle pieces that didn't fit. Whenever I tried to bring it up, the answer was always the same. "You're imagining things," or "Stop overthinking." It was a weaponized kind of dismissal, one that made me doubt not just them but myself. Deep down, though, their gaslighting couldn't silence my instincts. I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know how big, how life-shattering the truth really was. The fight that pushed me over the edge started like 1,000 others. My dad lecturing me about my attitude. I was 16, and every little thing felt like a battle. Whether I wanted to hang out with friends, whether I rolled my eyes at his rules. That night, though, it escalated in a way I didn't expect. He shouted that I didn't know how lucky I was to even have the life I had. That people like me shouldn't question what's given. The wording lodged in my chest like a stone. People like me? I demanded to know what that meant, but he just stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. The house felt suffocating after that. The anger buzzing in my chest was mixed with something else, an almost instinctive push to dig. They had secrets. I could feel it in my bones. And for the first time, I wasn't just curious, I was desperate. When my parents went out a few days later, Mom claimed it was for groceries, though she left looking nervous. I made my move. I walked into their room, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would give me away even in their absence. My eyes fell on the dresser, the locked drawer I'd obsessed over for years. I had found the spare key earlier that morning. After tearing apart my dad's desk, hands trembling as I slipped it into my pocket. Now, standing there, I slid the key into the lock, and the moment it clicked open, my whole body stiffened. Inside wasn't just junk or receipts. It was a box, neat and deliberate, filled with manila folders and photographs. My breath caught. I pulled it out, sat on the floor, and opened it like someone unwrapping a bomb. The first papers I unfolded were medical. My name was on them, but my mother's wasn't. The mother listed was someone I didn't recognize. My hands started to shake as I flipped through page after page. Adoption papers, signatures from lawyers, hospital discharge forms dated 3 days after what I thought was my birthday. Then came the photograph. A woman I had never seen before, holding a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her smile was tired but radiant, her hair sticking loosely to her face. The baby was me. I knew it instantly, the birthmark by my ear, the same eyes. For a moment, it felt like the world tilted off its axis. I dropped everything and pressed my back against the dresser, my chest heaving as though I'd run miles. I had imagined finding secrets, yes, but this? Adoption? My entire existence being concealed? Every memory I held close, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories, vacations, suddenly felt fragile, like they'd been painted over rotten wood. 1,000 emotions whipped through me in minutes. Rage that they had lied to me for so long, confusion about who this woman was, betrayal so heavy it made me want to scream into the walls. How could they keep something this enormous from me? How could they look me in the eyes every single day and pretend everything was normal? For a split second, I thought about stuffing everything back inside and waiting for them to come home, ready to erupt like a hurricane. But something in me stopped. If they had lied about this for 17 years, how could I trust a single word they said about her? About me? No. I needed to know the truth on my own. So I scooped the photograph into my pocket, shoved the papers back into the box, and locked the drawer again, as though I'd never been there. I knew I'd only gotten a crack in the door, but I was determined to fling it wide open. That woman in the picture, my true mother, the one they never told me about, was no longer just a stranger. She was a piece of me I had been starved from, and no matter how forbidden it was, I was going to find her. When I finally confronted them, I didn't walk into it calmly. I was no longer their obedient daughter tiptoeing around their moods. I was a storm that had been building for 17 years. I waited until dinner, when we were all sitting together. My hands shook as I pulled the papers from my backpack and slammed them on the table. The sound made Mom flinch, and Dad's fork froze midair. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice cracking more from fury than fear. "Who is she? Why are there adoption papers with my name on them?" For a moment, neither of them moved. It felt like a scene in slow motion. The silence, the way Mom's face went pale, the sharp twitch in Dad's jaw. Finally, Mom reached for the papers with trembling hands, trying to gather them up as though she could somehow erase them just by holding them. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice thin with panic. "I found them in your drawer," I snapped. "The one you keep locked. Do you have any idea how insane it feels to look at a stranger holding me as a baby and realize you lied about everything my whole life?" Mom broke almost immediately, covering her mouth like she was going to be sick. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks before she could wipe them away. "We only wanted to protect you," she sobbed. "We did it because we love you." Dad, though, was a different story. He stayed silent for several seconds, his expression hardening like a wall beads. "Being built right in front of me. This is not how you find out," he said finally, his voice low and firm. "We were going to tell you when the time was right." "When the time was right?" I snapped back, nearly choking on my own words. "The right time was about 17 years ago. You let me live my whole life as a lie." They exchanged a look, Mom breaking apart, Dad simmering with defensiveness. Then Dad muttered the words that burned themselves into me forever. "Your biological mother was unstable. She wasn't fit to raise a child. You would have had a terrible life with her." Unstable, unfit. They said it as if it were undeniable fact, as if they expected me to just nod and accept that they were my saviors. Mom leaned forward, sobbing harder now, whispering things like, "We gave you everything she couldn't. We gave you love, stability, a home." But something about the way they said it felt rehearsed, like lines from a script they'd practiced for years, just in case this day ever came. They were too ready, too quick, too polished for people supposedly caught off guard. My skin prickled with disbelief. I wanted to believe them. I really did. These were the people who tucked me in when I was sick, who cheered when I brought home good grades. But even as my mom's tears pulled at the softest parts of me, something inside refused to surrender. Their words didn't sound like truth. They sounded like excuses, convenient, simplified, and designed to make me feel guilty for even asking. My stomach turned as it hit me fully. If they had hidden something this monumental, what else weren't they telling me? If she was so dangerous, why keep photos of her carefully locked away instead of destroying them? Why were their medical papers filed so neatly instead of lost to time? Their version of events didn't add up, no matter how forcefully they pushed it. I pushed the papers back toward them, my hands shaking but my voice cut deep with certainty. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore. You lied. You took my entire identity and kept it locked in a drawer, like it was your property." Mom broke into sobs, begging me not to hate them, while Dad finally snapped, his voice sharp like a blade. "We are your only family, don't you ever forget that." But those words didn't comfort me. They chilled me. Because in that moment, I realized family built on lies doesn't feel like love. It feels like prison. After that night, there was no going back. The house felt claustrophobic, and every word out of my parents' mouths sounded like poison, no matter how tender they tried to make it. "We love you," Mom whispered constantly, her eyes red and swollen from crying, but those words felt hollow. I couldn't unsee the photograph of the woman holding me in her arms, a woman who looked nothing like a monster or a precautionary tale. I couldn't forget the practiced way they called her unstable, as if hoping repetition would turn it into truth. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them under this roof. So I did what any desperate teenager would. I turned to the internet. I sat on my bed night after night with my laptop glowing in my lap, searching her name over and over again. It took me days of dead ends, but eventually there she was. Her face popped up on a social media profile. My breath actually hitched when I saw her. 17 years older, yes, but undeniably the same woman from the photo. She had the same kind eyes, the same tired smile. Only now she looked confident, lively, even happy. There were pictures of her at charity events, at birthday parties with friends, hiking with a dog. A woman full of life. Not broken, not unstable, not even close. Everything about her existence contradicted what my parents had drilled into me. It made me sick to think how willingly they erased her. I couldn't stop scrolling, soaking in every detail. Her captions were heartfelt, playful, sometimes profound. The more I read, the more my chest ached because she seemed normal, achingly normal. And she felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain, like her words carried pieces of me I had been missing all along. I drafted a message to her a dozen times, deleting it each time because my hands shook too badly. What if she didn't want me? What if my parents had been right and she had moved on? The fear gnawed at me, but curiosity and longing pushed harder. Finally, one night past midnight, I hit send. The words were simple. "I think you might be my mother. My name is..." narrator's name. "If I'm wrong, please ignore this. If I'm right, I need to know why you left me." Then came the worst part, the wait. Days trickled by, each one stretching into lifetimes. Psst. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, convinced it was her. My stomach lurched every time it wasn't. But then, on the fourth day, the notification popped up. New message from her name. My hands went cold as I opened it. Her message started gently but immediately unraveled the version of reality I'd been given. She didn't deny it. She didn't hesitate. She said, "Yes, I am your mother, and not a single day has gone by that I haven't thought about you." I had to put the phone down because my vision blurred from tears. She explained everything in a series of long, heartfelt messages. She told me she hadn't abandoned me. She had been forced out of my life. When I was born, she was young, but she wasn't unstable. She worked 2 jobs, she provided, and she loved me fiercely. But my father, my adoptive father, had family connections, influence, and money. He convinced the court she was unfit, painting her as reckless and incapable. He had resources she didn't. Lawyers suit he couldn't afford to fight. She said she remembered walking out of that courtroom feeling like her soul had been ripped out of her chest. "My biggest mistake," she wrote, "was underestimating how far they would go to erase me. They told lies, made me look like someone I wasn't. I wanted you. I fought for you. But they tore you out of my arms and I didn't have the power to stop them. I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping one day you'd find me." I read those messages over and over again, clutching the phone to my chest like it might make me whole again. Every syllable shredded the story my parents had fed me. Unstable? Unfit? No. She was robbed, silenced, manipulated, and I was the one who grew up stolen, trapped in a perfect picture engineered by lies. In that moment, everything crystallized. My parents hadn't saved me. They had taken me, and I wasn't just their child. I was their secret. The first time I saw her in person, I thought my heart was going to punch itself out of my chest. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in a part of town I rarely went to, and I must have checked my reflection in the window a dozen times before she even walked in. Then the door chimed, and there she was, my birth mother. For a minute, I just stared, almost unable to connect this real, breathing woman with the faded photo I had dug out of my parents' secret stash. She looked the same as in her pictures online, but more alive, more tangible. Her eyes locked onto mine, and it was like that invisible thread I didn't even know had been tugging at me for years finally snapped into place. We didn't do the polite hello. She walked straight over, and suddenly her arms were around me. I felt her body shaking as she whispered, "You're even more beautiful than I ever imagined." All the walls I'd built to protect myself crumbled right then. Tears just poured down my face and I clung to her like I could make up all 17 lost years in a single hug. Neither of us wanted to let go. The conversation that follows. Load was messy. Pauses heavy with everything we couldn't quite put into words. Bursts of laughter at tiny things we realized we had in common. Painful confessions of how much we'd both missed. She told me about the first year after she lost me, how she would walk past playgrounds and wonder which stroller might have been mine if things had been different. I told her about growing up feeling like an outsider in my own family and how desperately I wished I'd known her sooner. At one point, she reached across the table, held my hand, and said softly, "You were never unwanted. You were stolen from me." It was overwhelming but healing at the same time. For the first time, the pieces of myself that never seemed to fit started clicking into place. Of course, keeping this reunion a secret from my adoptive parents was like standing on a ticking time bomb. And predictably, it didn't stay secret for long. It was my brother who caught me. He saw the text on my phone and didn't hesitate to snitch. Within hours, I came home to my dad waiting in the living room, his face crimson with fury. Mom sat on the couch, wringing her hands like she wanted to disappear. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "Have you been seeing her?" I didn't even try to lie. "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "She's my mother, and I have every right to know her." That set him off like an explosion. He slammed his fist onto the coffee table, roaring, "You will not see that woman again, do you hear me? She has no place in your life." His voice made my skin crawl because it wasn't just anger, it was fear. Fear of losing the control he had gripped onto my entire life. I shouted back through tears, my voice cracking, "She does have a place in my life. She always has. You're the ones who ripped it away." Mom leapt up then, her sobs spilling out as she dropped to her knees in front of Aris. Me. She grabbed my hands, her words tumbling like water. "Please, please don't do this. Don't ruin our family. We've raised you. We've loved you. We've given you everything. Isn't that enough?" Her desperation terrified me more than Dad's anger because she was still trying to convince me that love could excuse 17 years of lies. Dad added venomously, "If you walk down this path, you'll lose us. You think that woman can give you what we have? Forget your car. Forget your college fund. Forget living under this roof. It's us or her." The ultimatum hit me like a sucker punch. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter. They had made me into a possession, and they were demanding I choose which jail cell to live in. Theirs, gilded with comfort but caged by secrets, or hers, unfamiliar but drenched in truth. The house became a war zone after that. Every interaction with them was loaded with tension. Mom clinging to me with tearful pleas, Dad barking rules and threats. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my birth mother, gentle and patient, reminding me she wouldn't force me but that she was here, waiting with open arms. My heart pulled in two directions and the weight of it cracked something inside me. At night, I lay awake wondering if anything I'd grown up believing about love was real. Because how can love coexist with so many lies? How can people claim to protect you when their protection feels like a cage? Their words, unstable, unfit, unwanted, kept colliding with hers. Stolen, silenced, loved, and I didn't know how much longer I could let myself be pulled apart before I completely broke. I used to think home was a place. 4 walls and a roof where you could feel safe no matter what happened outside. But after everything unraveled, I didn't feel at home anywhere. Not in the house I grew up in, where every photo on the walls now felt like props in a theater of lies. Not with my birth mother either, even though I wanted to desperately. She was warm and kind, but she was also still a stranger who carried the weight of my entire existence in her eyes. Being with her was like pressing against a wound. It hurt, even while it healed. The pull between the two worlds tore me apart until I started drifting in every part of my life. My grades tanked for the first time ever. Homework sat untouched, shoved into the bottom of my backpack. Teachers pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay, but I just mumbled excuses. My best friend noticed too. "You're not you anymore," she said, her voice lined with worry. But how could I explain when even I didn't know who me was anymore? The worst part was when word about my secret started leaking through school halls. Somehow, someone caught wind of the adoption, and by the end of the week, it was cafeteria gossip. I'll never forget the first time I heard the whispers. Girls at the next table laughing, one of them sneering, even her real mom didn't want her. That sentence gutted me like a knife. It was cruel, shallow, but in my raw state, I absorbed it as truth. I went home that day trembling, my chest burning, imagining my entire life now branded with that label, unwanted. I thought about running away more times than I can admit. I'd stand in my room staring at my packed backpack, wondering if I could disappear into my birth mother's world without warning, wondering if she'd really welcome me, all of me, with my messy pain and fury, or if I was just another scar for her. The idea of going back to obeying my adoptive father's rules was unbearable, but the idea of diving into my birth mother's life, trusting fully after so many betrayals, terrified me too. One night, lying awake in the dark, I let the tears come until my whole body shook. I felt like a ghost in my own life, existing between two families but belonging to neither. But then a thought broke through all this. Noise, sharp and undeniable. This wasn't just about them anymore. For the first time, it was about me, my choices, my future. My identity didn't belong to my father or my mother or even to whispers in school. It belonged to me. The clarity hit like a gut punch, both painful and liberating. I couldn't keep waiting for one side to claim me, couldn't keep being tugged back and forth like a prize in their war. I was done being someone else's secret or trophy or burden. Even if I had to crawl through the loneliness, even if I lost everything I thought I had, I needed to step out and declare my life mine. Broken or not, stolen or not, it was mine. The showdown happened sooner than I expected, and in the ugliest way imaginable. My birth mother wanted to fight for me, to stand her ground after all the years she'd been shoved aside. And when she showed up uninvited at our house one Saturday afternoon, everything exploded. I heard the knock on the door, and when I opened it, there she was. Nervous, but resolute. My dad's face went red instantly, like a kettle boiling over. Mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" Dad barked, his voice carrying that mix of threat and panic I'd come to know so well. "I'm here for my daughter," my birth mother said, her voice steady but her hands trembling at her sides. The word daughter practically made Dad combust. "She is not your daughter. You gave her up because you were unfit, and we raised her. She belongs to us." "No," she shot back, stepping closer. "You stole her from me. You twisted the truth. You made sure I couldn't fight you." Her eyes flicked toward me then, and my chest felt like it was being torn in half. I stood frozen in the doorway as secrets ripped loose like floodwaters. She revealed that years ago my father had threatened her directly, not just with expensive lawyers but with ruination, promising he'd drag her name through the mud, telling her she'd end up homeless if she resisted. He hadn't just beat it, and her in court. He'd crushed any hope she had of standing. "He told me no one would believe me," she said, her voice breaking. "And he was right. I had nothing." For a moment, I thought Mom might jump in to defend him, but she didn't. Instead, she crumbled. Her sobs echoed in the room, her hands clutching her chest like she couldn't breathe. "It's true," she admitted, her voice shaking. I knew all along he went too far, but I was terrified. If I spoke out, I'd lose her forever. I'd lose everything. So I stayed quiet. I chose him over the truth. She looked at me then, her eyes desperate and wet. "Forgive me. I just wanted a family, our family, to survive." Her words hurt just as much as his threats. Survival had been bought at the cost of my identity, my history, my choices. I wasn't just betrayed by one of them, I was betrayed by both. Dad tried one last tactic, his voice sharp and ironclad. Whatever lies she's feeding you, don't fall for it. We gave you stability, love, a good life. That's all that matters. But something inside me snapped. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out stronger than I thought it could. No, that's not all that matters. You chose lies. You chose control over honesty. You stole me and built my life on secrets. That's not love. I turned toward my birth mother, then back at them. I choose truth. I choose myself, and I will never let either of you control me again. The silence afterward was suffocating. Mom sobbed harder. Dad's face hardened like stone, and my birth mother reached for my shoulder with tears in her eyes. The war was over, not because either side had really won, but because I refused to play the pawn in their battle any longer. Walking out of that house after the final confrontation felt like leaving behind a version of myself I could never go back to. My adoptive mother's cries echoed in my head. My father's threats still stung, but I refused to turn around. For the first time in 17 years, I felt something unfamiliar but intoxicating. Freedom. It wasn't clean or easy. My heart was bruised, my trust battered, but at least I was finally stepping forward on my own terms instead of living in the shadow of their lies. My relationship with them didn't vanish overnight, but it fractured beyond repair. Mom still called sometimes, her voice raw with guilt. She begged me to visit, to forgive, to remember the good times. Part of me pitied her, part of me wanted to forgive, but the truth was too big to patch over with nostalgia. My dad barely spoke to me at all, except through clipped messages about responsibility and gratitude. His silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was just proof of who he really was. Meanwhile, my bond with my birth mother began as a fragile thread and slowly grew stronger. We didn't pretend the past could be erased. Instead, we built something new, brick by careful brick. Our first lunches were awkward. We had years of silence to fill. But every story she shared about herself, every detail about her family, felt like finding pieces of myself scattered in the world. She told me about the hobbies she loved, the dreams she once had, and I realized some of those same sparks lived in me. At school, people still whispered, still threw cruel comments when they could, but I stopped flinching. Their words couldn't wound me the way they once had. Not when I finally knew who I was. I wasn't unwanted. I wasn't unstable. I was the daughter of a woman who fought and the survivor of parents who lied. That truth was mine. It belonged to me, unshakable now. When spring came, I filled out my college applications, and for the first time ever, I wrote my real last name. Seeing it on the page sent chills through me. It wasn't just ink, it was a declaration. I was done living as someone else's version of me. The scars of this story will never really vanish. I know that. There will always be moments when I ache, when I wonder what my life could have been if I'd been raised differently. But I don't look at those scars as weakness anymore. They're proof of my survival, of all the lies I clawed my way through to get here. This isn't a fairy tale ending. It's messy, painful, complicated, but it's real. And as I step into the future carrying both the anger and the hope, I can finally say those words I once thought didn't belong to me. This is my life. This is my beginning.